What's up, my Minecraft Hunger Game winners? It's XTR back to bring you a brand new video. And before we get started, I just have a quick update. So I will be leaving this Wednesday. I don't know when this video is going up, but I have a couple pre-planned uploads for the period in which I will be gone. And this is going to be a recurring thing. I will be leaving for week to 2 week long periods every other week or so, I believe. So it's going to be a little bit hard for me to work around, but I'm trying to get content out there and that, you know, people can actually watch and learn stuff from while in the process of being gone. And on other news, I have all the parts for my PC aside from the GPU. So in about 1 month, I will probably have saved up enough for the fucking GPU because that is the most expensive part of the entire build. So if you have any suggestions, just remember, once again, go ahead in the Discord and leave them there or in the comments. I do see most of your comments, but I am getting a little bit more flooded and a little bit more overwhelmed with the comments lately. So it's going to be a little bit harder for me to respond to each and every one, but I do sift through the Discord quite often. So if you have any suggestions, leave them in the Discord. This video here that you're about to see is actually a suggestion from the Discord. So I hope you guys enjoy this video. Let's get started right now. Alright, what's up, you freaky fucking boys? It's XTR, and we are back, and we are in game. And before we get started, I am trying out new quality settings, because earlier you couldn't actually go into 1080p, and it would actually work. So let me know if the quality actually looks good this time around. And, so let's get started. So basically the premise is, what is baiting utility and how do you do it? So before we get started with actually teaching you guys how to bait utility, I'm going to quickly explain what baiting utility is. It's basically using your presence and using your utility around the map to bait out utility from the defending or attacking side. We're mainly going to be talking about attacking side here. So that's generally what we're going to go over for the most part. And when you are baiting utility, this is best done when you are either grouped up as a team or mainly when you are in a default. Defaulting is usually the best time to actually bait out utility properly. And what a default is basically the default setup that you're going to run on the attacker's side when you spread your forces out across the map. Say you have two towards A, one's covering short, one's covering long. You have one just sitting around alt mid, making sure they don't push through. And one towards C site, or let's say we have two mid. That'd make more sense. So like one alt mid, one just kind of waiting in mid. That would look pretty decent for a default setup on this map. So really quick, if you were to play default, one of the biggest things about playing a default is baiting out the proper utility from the enemy team and prompting them to use their utility on you. So if I am playing Cypher, bad example, but if I am playing Cypher towards a site over here, I would want to be attempting to bait out utility. Let's say I have already gained long control and I am pushed up to this point and my team's completely spread out around the map, and I am trying to, not only am I trying to pull out utility from them, which is getting them to use their abilities, their grenades, their smokes, their flashes, shit like that, and potentially even draw a rotate from a different site. Given if you are baiting utility on this site, chances are the rest of your team is going to be attempting to bait utility as well in some form. But if you are the sole proprietor for baiting utility, then what you are going to want to do is show presence here, make noise, potentially take a shoulder out, and try and get them to use utility on you. And what them using utility on you would look like is them having maybe a brimstone or a viper put up a smoke here. Now, one of the big things in this game is a lot of the utility you can kind of just get back after a certain amount of time. Like if there was a Viper playing here and she used her gas cloud, it wouldn't really be that effective for me to actually be baiting that kind of utility out. The only utility that would be effective for me to bait out would be her acid spit. But the thing is, if you know that there is, like, say, a brimstone playing around A, or you know people with utility that will not come back is playing in certain areas, that's the utility you want to bait in this game. Because in Counter-Strike, utility never comes back, but in this game there are certain pieces of utility and equipment that will come back over time. And it's very important that you are baiting out the utility that cannot come back, because you want to gain that economic advantage by baiting out the utility and taking away utility that they can use to shut down a push. Now, one of the big things is, one of the biggest pieces of utility you can take away is going to be smokes to shut down chokes, or even potentially a sage wall. If you can get that sage wall out and those brimstone smokes out, that's going to be very advantageous for you, because that's going to be one of the main pieces of the enemy team's defense. So if I'm playing around here, what I could do if I was brimstone is I could throw down a couple smokes on the site, and yes, I'd be using 2 of mine, but in return, he'd probably use a couple of his. Now, You have to be very careful when you are baiting out utility, and you have to make sure that the utility you are using to bait out utility is actually worth it. Like if you were using 3 of your brimstone smokes on a site, like you were smoking all of this shit. Okay, let's say you're throwing 2 down here only for 1 smoke. It may not be worth it in the long run because you might need those 2 smokes as brimstone. But for people with more expendable utility, like a flashbang from Phoenix, if I were to just flash this angle and peek out a little bit, maybe throw a Molotov in that back corner over there in cubby, I could potentially bait out a smoke or some extra utility from the enemy team. I could get them to maybe try flashing this box here. Say there was a Phoenix or a Breach playing on this box, and they were to flash out. That would be baiting out utility. Now, you can do it with just presence, like if you are just making noise around here and like shooting and kind of very lightly clearing out certain angles, like this angle right here. Maybe just throwing down a cage and grabbing this ball, or faking it and just tapping the ball. That could bait out utility as well. So sound, presence, and utility are the 3 big things that will actually get you utility baited. Sound is sound cues that you were giving to the enemy team, letting them know that you are in the area, in the vicinity. Utility is obviously using your own utility to actually bait shit out from them. And your presence is going to be how much presence you are actually giving in this area. If there are 2 of you here, they are much likely to use more utility on this area. But if there's only 1 of you, you know, making noise and shit, they might know that you're trying to bait out your utility, but they might not. So honestly, what you are doing really is you're just using your body, you're using everything in your disposal without wasting anything to try and bait out the utility. You can throw a cam up here, you can cam out sight, potentially waste a cage if you're really feeling yourself, peek out, and try and bait utility. That's one of the biggest things in this game. Let's say I was playing Brimstone, right? We already went over this. But if I was just to smoke off 1 main choke point, like right here, that could very easily get the defenders on their toes. That could very easily set them off to the point where they're actually blowing utility here and might actually rotate 1 over just from that. People play very fast in this game, so it's very common for people to rotate quickly off of just some utility presence and some presence in general. So another big thing you can do with baiting utility is, instead of just using a little bit of your presence and a little bit of your utility to actually bait shit out, is you can use your full set of utility. Let's say I'm playing Phoenix. So what I want to do to bait out a shit ton of utility is I expend pretty much my full kit to potentially draw out 2 players' full sets of utility, or at least half of their utility. Say you bait out some of Breach's flashes and his utility and a Brimstone smoke, that's a very big gain in your favor. And once you expend your full utility set, you would then become the entry fragger. Once you are out of utility, you don't really have much of an other purpose other than to just go in first on the site and be that first buffer into the bomb site. And one of the main things I forgot to mention with baiting utility is the main importance for this is it opens up so many opportunities for your team when the enemy team is low on utility. If there are people, let's say there are 2 people that you have baited utility out from a site, like say you've baited out a Brimstone, 2 Brimstone smokes potentially, a Sage Wall even, maybe a flashbang, and that cuts down so many options for the defender side because they are lacking utility in that regard. They won't be able to retake nearly as easily, and it's going to be much harder for them to actually grip and hold onto a site. Now, given you are giving up your full set of utility, so you are giving up all of this, but in return, you are gaining yourself that net advantage. Potentially, you are potentially gaining yourself that advantage. And that's why you have to be very smart about this. You don't want to do this every round to the point where it's very predictable, but to some extent, you can be doing this in certain areas of the map. If you keep baiting utility, you keep gaining that slight advantage for your team. So if I was Phoenix, what I would do to actually bait out a ton of utility, and if I wanted to expend my whole kit, is I would throw a flash here so I can peek out with the spell. I'd throw a wall down, throw another flash potentially, and just hold angles, spray a little bit, make noise, maybe even potentially throw a Molotov in the back. Now, you are using all your utility for this. All of it. If you want to, because this is pretty much what you are doing, is you are faking an execute onto the bomb site, and you are scaring the shit out of the defenders. They will think that you are hitting the bomb site, and they will probably rotate at least 1 player over if you do something like this. And they will most definitely use at least a little bit of their utility if they see all this pressure coming in from the Phoenix. Now, they will take note that it is only the Phoenix making pressure, because the big thing in this game is everyone's abilities look fucking different, so you can tell how many people are usually out of sight. But you are still nonetheless faking an execute to some extent. And not only that, but if you were to expend just a little bit of your kit, maybe throw a flashbang, maybe you have a Brimstone around here, he can smoke off this side of sight, you can throw a flashbang, you can throw a wall down, and that will look much more like an actual execute to the enemy team. They will actually think, for the most part, that you were most likely going to execute the site. They will start throwing their utility down. They will start panicking. They might rotate someone over. That is the basics of baiting utility. And that is the basics of giving pressure and a little bit about defaulting that some people may not know. Now, I know I kind of just scratched the surface of it, but I wanted to give the basics of what baiting utility exactly is and why it's useful. Baiting utility is very strong, and it is one of the biggest ways you can actually win rounds. So, I mean, that's pretty much all the fuck I wanted to go over. It's not that much. It's not extremely in-depth, but it is a little more in-depth than I have gone recently. Recently, I've been sticking more towards the beginner side of things, but this one's going to be a little bit more advanced for like mid to high elo players. I know a lot of higher elo players don't really bait at utility whatsoever. So, there you go, guys. Just keep track of the enemy's utility, keep track of the utility that they are using, keep track of the utility you are using, and make sure not to waste any of your utility, as it can be very, very impactful. If you are going to use your utility on the site, you better be damn well sure that they're going to use at least a little bit of theirs. Don't go in with your full kit every single round and just blow all your utility on one site and just say you're baiting utility, because that's not how the fuck it works. You can do it every once in a while, but it's not one of those things you want to do every round. You can bait utility every round, yes, but you don't want to be predictable about it. Now, to close out the video, if anyone has anything to add to this video, just leave it in the comments. Let me know what you guys think, and I will be back soon with another video. Y'all have a wonderful fucking day.